everybody, and welcome to part two of the OpenStax College Psychology course. My name is Prescott, and I'm here at Psychcinct Psychology, and I will be walking you through this yet again. So hopefully you don't get bored of me, and we can continue going. So last time we went over, Freud, Gestalt psychology, classical conditioning, kind of just introducing everybody to the basics of psychology and different psychological perspectives. And so we will continue to do that here in part two, and we're going to pick up where we left off, which is at John B. Watson, behaviorism. So John B. Watson is known as the father of behaviorism within psychology. He believed that objective analysis of the mind was impossible. So if you don't know, subjective is opinion-based, objective is faction-based. So he's basically saying it's impossible to objectively or factually evaluate the mind. Instead, he focused on observable behavior and ways to bring that behavior under control. Today, behaviorism is used in behavioral and cognitive behavioral therapy. So his stance was that, unlike Freud, who was trying to analyze the mind through dreams and kind of unconscious behaviors, childhood experiences, John B. Watson would argue with that and say, no, you can't do that. Instead, focus on the behavior and then try and find a way to bring that behavior under control. So using the example I used last time, where sometimes I make impulsive decisions that don't always benefit me, instead of focusing on, maybe how Freud would be, maybe as a child, this happened, you did this, which is explaining your behaviors. Watson would directly analyze my behavior and then be like, okay, we need to get this under control. So that's Watson and behaviorism. Continuing on, B.F. Skinner. So Skinner concentrated on how behavior was affected by its consequences. So he studied the principles of modifying behavior through reinforcement and punishment, which he saw as major factors in driving behavior. So operant conditioning. Now, it's important not to get classical and operant conditioning confused, because if you remember, classical conditioning involves conditioning, and we're going to use the dog example again, a dog to salivate at a bell, the sound of a bell, through exposure to the neutral stimulus of the bell, added with the unconditioned stimulus of food, to eventually the dog will associate the ringing of the bell with the food and will start salivating. Now, Skinner, in operant conditioning, he focuses more on punishment and behavior and reinforcement. So let's say that you had a child who was throwing tantrums all the time, or, now let's use a better example. Let's say you had a kid who didn't want to do his homework. He just refused to do it. You just want to play video games. Well, Skinner would say you need to punish him to enforce or try and encourage the behavior of studying, doing his homework. And how you do that is by removing his video game. So mom hides his Xbox, right? Punishment is when you remove a stimulus. Reinforcement is when you add a stimulus. So reinforcement would be like giving a little kid a lollipop for getting an A on their math homework, right? So that's the key difference. Classical conditioning is training somebody or something to respond to a neutral stimulus, and operant conditioning is training somebody to behave a certain way through either reinforcement or punishment. Key difference there. Just make sure you don't get it confused. And here we have Skinner, a little example of, pretty sure I remember this, the rat, certain light would flash, and there's a speaker, rat pushes a lever and gets food based on if he follows the cues correctly. Continuing on, Abraham Maslow, Humanism. So here we have a nice graph of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we'll go more into this in a second. So Maslow proposed a hierarchy of human needs in moderating behavior, or motivating behavior, Maslow asserted that so long as basic needs necessary for survival were met, so, food, water, shelter, we all need that, higher level needs, example, social needs, social acceptance, would begin to motivate behavior. So, again, as long as your basic survival needs are met, then, because that's what motivates you, if those are met, then higher level needs, such as having friends, getting a job, would motivate your behavior rather than getting food and water. So this is broken down in this chart here. So at the very base, we have physical needs. So you need food, water, shelter, and warmth. So that at this level, that's what motivates your behavior. You're motivated to go find food and clean water and whatnot. Once you have these, then you can move up to security. So, being safe, having a job, having assets. So those start to motivate your behavior once these are met. And that's how this whole pyramid goes. Once this level is met, then your behavior is influenced by the next level, and so on and so forth. So social, so family, friendship, intimacy, feeling belonged, like you belong somewhere, that motivates your behavior. Esteem, so your self-worth, feeling of accomplishment, feeling of confidence, motivates your behavior. And at the very top, self-actualization, so inner fulfillment. You feel fulfilled with yourself. You feel content with who you are and how you behave. So that's humanism. Continuing, Carl Rogers' humanism. Carl Rogers developed a client-centered therapy method that has been influential in clinical settings. Client-centered therapy involves the patient taking a lead role in the therapy session. Rogers believed therapists need unconditional positive regard, genuineness, and empathy. So he really emphasized, not being critical, not being judgmental when you're working with a client. He says you need to have these three aspects when you're with a client. So you need to unconditionally be positive. You can't say, oh, you did this, you're a bad person. You need to be positive about it. Being genuine, so, no sarcasm, no snarkiness. And having empathy, or being able to feel what your client is feeling. If they're depressed, you can understand that, and you feel for them, basically. So, going on from the psychological perspectives, we have the cognitive revolution. So, by the 1950s, new disciplinary perspectives in linguistics, neuroscience, and computer science were emerging. The mind became the new focus of scientific inquiry. So Noam Chomsky was very influential in beginning the cognitive revolution. He believed psychology needed to incorporate mental functioning into its focus in order to fully understand human behavior. So kind of think of the cognitive revolution like the industrial revolution, but instead of focusing on technology and building and whatnot, cognitive revolution focused on the mind, cognitive. This, again, happened in the 1950s, and Noam Chomsky was a very important person during all of this. Going on, we have Margaret Floyd Washburn. Here's a nice picture of her, very pretty lady. So she is the first woman to earn a doctorate in psychology, which is obviously, that's a big deal. She researched on animal behavior and published an authoritative text on the subject. So, can't really go too much into this. Pretty self-explanatory here, what OpenStax is telling us. Continuing, we have contemporary psychology. So there's, as you can see, a bunch of branches of this. We have biopsychology, and again, it's going to be the same as the psychological perspectives, where I just kind of have this list here, and I just go through it real quick, but then we go more in depth with the following slides. So we have biopsychology and evolutionary psychology. Actually, I have a quick little game. If you don't know what all these different branches are, try and guess what they cover just based on the name, and see if you're right. So then we have sensation and perception, cognitive psychology, developmental. I'm not going to say psychology at the end of each one. It's psychology. Developmental, personality, social, health, industrial, organizational, sports and exercise, clinical, and forensic psychology. And so before we get into all of these, I'm going to end this part, and we will continue going through the different branches of psychology in the next part. And I hope you guys found this lesson informative. Again, my name is Prescott. This is Psychcinct Psychology, and have a great day, and join me next time. Thank you.